Ah, that's a grand story about the eldest boy from that wealthy family. He's a really nice guy who can't seem to care about anything else since he's only been at school for a while. And then, as he walked by, a violent bolt of lightning hit him from the sky out of nowhere. A ghost appeared out of nowhere and reached for the heart he had left behind. Fernan looked up and saw something terrifying as he tried to use all his energy to protect himself from the threat. Despite everything happening, a piece of the spirit's soul finally merged with him. In that split second, memories from another person flooded his mind while strange texts appeared in his vision. They were like warnings about 7 evil demons who would invade Earth and cause chaos for all of humanity. It's hard not to feel scared when you're told that danger was coming for a very long time. He had heard the news and saw the hard truth. His great-grandfather would be kicked out of his family entirely, leaving him as a starving beggar with nowhere to go. Oh, the world was about to collapse, but the real torment was the news that he'd lose everything and live in poverty. Since then, Fernan can no longer forget how the day changed. And now, every class feels like a chance to see what happens when the world's future meets his destiny of becoming a humble beggar. He knows exactly what happens next. The teacher finally took the last piece of his own soul away, yet Fernan couldn't figure out how he had ever gotten there in the first place. Fernan stared at his hand where the teacher had vanished, confused whether he could still remember or if something had truly gone wrong. There was one very real certainty. The prophecy had come from far away with high odds. He figured out exactly how much to watch for just by looking forward to it, because every time the prophecy came true, his Luna got bigger and he had a whole new income to share with everyone else. The secretary asked how the class was, so Fernan answered that they were all exactly the same, yet he found himself accepting a little more coffee as he picked up his newspaper. His secretary wondered if the young lady was sick, but Fernan said no. He explained she had many things in her head, while the old man asked why she did so often for years. 6 months ago, he decided to go out for quite some time. That detective who once tried everything for his case suddenly felt like a monster after a thunderstorm hit him hard. Fernan stood there, staring at the dusty paper with a mix of curiosity and shock as he realized his mistake. It was just another Armenian who slipped into his study when he last saw him. Fernan sprinted away as his boss's assistant asked where the rest of the data came from, causing him to turn toward the southern direction. While the waiter watched his boss go, he kept asking why that coffee was so good. The Imperial Academy grew like a sprawling kingdom on Bardian's magical isle, stretching across the endless sea with forests and fields that felt alive through magic. As it stretched eastward, the southern coast turned into a marshy river where Fernan stood alone, wondering if his ancient prophecy had been spoken to him by an unseen hand. In a room full of news about terrible things coming next week, Fernan couldn't believe the truth whispered to him in his head, yet he pretended nothing was wrong at all. In that distant future, when Fernan Fellenberg turns out to be a beggar, the 700 souls of Solomon had been brought back from an eternity of silence to hear their own voices speaking one last time. And third, imagine an Armenian hero stepping up to fight the scary beasts and save the world from them. He is a figure no ordinary man can understand, for Keenus Armian founded an empire with 5 surrounding kingdoms. Now, centuries later, his family has lost its power entirely. The prophecy promises that the descendant named in Armenia will be the hero who finishes his exam and runs away into the swamp described in detail as a book. He stepped out from behind the shadow and checked his reflection in the mirror, knowing that his actions might just be a lie before he finally proved them all true. This guy isn't just the main hero of the prophecy. He's actually someone with a bad future right next door. The biggest problem isn't that Fernan doesn't know what the prophecy says. It's that he can't really understand a single word at all, let alone read every single page. It was only a superficial reason, because joining a demon makes absolutely no sense at all. You were walking through a swamp and desperately looking for a secret dungeon where everyone else had already gone. The battlefield was filled with whispers of old power, as the army's first commander laid down his sword to face the enemy, but no one could tell how it felt when he looked at it. He told a story about how, in a prophecy book, he's the only one who could save the world but failed because he lacked the fighting spirit to defeat demons until he found blood near him, thinking he was just being injured from a dungeon fight and that his true power had never truly shown up. A croaker stood as a fierce guard in the dark swamp, ready to protect whatever lay before him. Fernan whispered the word from his own book, knowing he'd already checked in and heard a strange whisper before he even realized what he had found. The ink has been waiting in the shadows of the dungeon, but ink hasn't even finished entering it yet. Fernan said the place was only open to new arrivals. Then he asked, "Why do you think so?" And the protagonist answered, "I know his family. They were from Armenia. There is a man named who has never known his own true name before, and he is now trying to figure out exactly what makes him who he is. Fernan said he'd like to be known as Suinba, even though he knew the name and agreed it would work out. Meanwhile, Fernan asked if he had actually run away from a lizard. He caught the crooker by his side when he replied. Fernan threw his potion and shouted about how often the bad luck had happened, telling him to be careful because he'd been unlucky this year. He held up the magic crystal in his hand, knowing exactly what he'd done and how much worse drinking 10 small vials meant for him. Fernan gently nudged A's hand as he tried to explain why he couldn't pay, offering the alternative. Call him Suinba, and tell them the family's fall doesn't matter because he has imperial blood, making his situation look like a smart investment rather than a debt. While thinking about how different he really is from what people say, A thanks his son for letting him stay. Meanwhile, Fernan worries that staying alone might be a big mistake, fearing that missing the prophecy could make him look like the unlucky guy who gets kicked out when someone else tries to invade. He's not going to be able to handle this kind of kindness any longer. Fernan decides to stay hidden and disappear, pretending the world won't notice him leave behind. It took him only a little while longer before he found his way to the dungeon. Fernan looked around and said, "That's right, it's actually quite a big area that hasn't been fully cleared out yet." It wasn't about magic. It was just that those glowing lamps were so bright and strange that even a man with no mana felt uneasy about them all at once. A mysterious force seemed to be pulling him close, making his heart beat fast as he wondered if those lights were truly only for a few moments or if they would stay forever. He remembered that they looked nothing like the prophecy, so he couldn't count his luck to expect anything good about himself. It was written in a prophecy that someone ended up falling into a dark dungeon after getting hurt. As he crashed through the walls, everything shattered inside him. He chewed down every last potion left over, yet his body still hurt from the battle, forcing him to keep marching forward despite the agony until he spotted a strange shape in the distance. At the very last step down the altar, a long sword suddenly felt like its own hand was taking it. A fierce climber seized their weapon as they surged forward into the abyssal depths where the world dissolved, leaving only one radiant light to guide them home. Fernan decided his spell failed because the air felt too faint and weak, even though he still felt like a shadow. The holy sign in the center of the altar didn't belong to anyone who cleaned out the dungeon without hurting a single soul. It all came down to a big misunderstanding about whether the prophecy actually happened at all. He's been thinking about becoming the next poor man, but reality has been so bad today that he can't even imagine how to make it better. The brave warrior in the story isn't Armian, yet he stands at the center of a prophecy that will save everyone from falling into demonic traps and bring his own tragic ending down. He was still climbing the ladder of talent, yet his heart felt like a new person entirely. He wasn't just a guy who cared about money. He was someone whose heart held more value than any gold coin could ever buy. He stared at the fire that might erupt from the careless approach, wondering how to handle such a tricky situation, while his servant asked if he knew what was really going on. Fernan tells Hyde about a secret dream that must wait for his hard work, so he explains where the treasure is and demands he make it real before anyone else finds out. The young master tells him he's not in his right place. The Duke insists that money alone is enough to make anyone look good, so Hyde refuses to see how it makes sense for a personality to match those who own the wealth. Fernan often struggled because dealing with monsters felt like fighting the whole world at once, but he rarely cared if everyone else got rich or loved back. No, wait. He needs more details before he even knows what to do with him, and then warns himself that the moment finds him right now. His servant asked where the guest would be going next, though he sighed as his master departed. At the academy, each student's room gets its number from their entrance exam score, where a perfect 10 is called Lebetis, the top tier of everyone. From 12 through 30, these extraordinary students shine brightly. The flowery silence dropped when the sword's voice screamed its name, leaving only the strange scent of dust on the walls behind it. Even if the current emperor knew that the world was about to end in blood, he wouldn't leave a single grave empty. Instead, he'd just stand there, his face grim as he watched the demons appear one after another. The blade's own mind screamed, "We've done this for a while. Something so absurd must have happened if we really try to stop it." The old man told the boy not to fight because his heart was still too weak for the blade to hold. So when the sword screamed in protest that it didn't trust him, they simply walked away together without a single word. He admitted that truthfully, the real villain was the first ruler because he tore up the ancient rules of power and picked a new king from those who came along like lightning strikes. 100 years later, he still had the best of those lands in his hands. They handed that land away as time wore them down, leaving the people to watch a lifetime of losing fortune and losing their skills in their own hands. Even though he stood as a lone candidate amidst heavy circumstances, the emperor replied with confidence, I know what you have, yet I am determined to give every single thing you need to reclaim your lost glory. This emperor put his new son in the palace for a very important reason. Fernan knocks on the door, hoping to find out where the young man is, while he tries to figure out who might have been there first. The boy told him it was his own son, because he knew perfectly who was actually his little one. It starts with A opening the door and asking Fernan if he was staying home all day while the other guys are doing something else, so he could come back later. A swordswoman tells a hero that she's done worrying about matters, so they just decide to head out for a walk together. It got very loud as he decided to take a quiet rest instead. He asked A to wait 10 minutes before leaving. Fernan isn't happy about how long he waits to discipline his son. He doesn't want to have to wait any longer than the usual 5. The young man nods at the door and says, "I'll stand right here waiting." The first emperor's heart wails as he stares at that stranger and wonders why they're talking so much about him. A asks his father about the magic spell before Fernan steps forward to show the sword. The knight says he has no bad intentions, and the hero immediately recalls that brave warriors never leave their swords behind. He thought the emperor himself was trying to make sure he knew why he was being invited. Fernan answered with a laugh, saying that everything had been merely the start of his meal plans before going home. The little boy floated up with a big smile on his face, while the girl tried hard to keep her voice low so she wouldn't sound like an adult, but the boy insisted that even if it was too much, Fernan would never let him go. The protagonist thinks he's a good guy who wants to learn how a villain tricked him into his own fate. He asked himself why the boy would want to graduate and leave his friends behind, even though everyone was supposed to expand their reach, because the Armenian always grew stronger without ever being allowed to talk. It struck me terribly when a fellow student from our class finally arrived at school, only to find out they had been unfairly treated as funniness until they realized their job was actually very serious. The Armenian family stayed truly royal despite the fact that they were called a name alone. The true cause of why he would finally restore his family's honor was that he had to do so. Fernan feels like a king with all the right cards in hand because he knows he's from such a prestigious family, even if he isn't quite sure about what they really mean yet. Fernan didn't want to be just another kind child. Instead of being an authority figure himself, he would help others later on, which was a smart thing not to do now, because it would have hurt the boy's pride if he were to lose his life for someone else. He decided that building loyalty and trust would be his main goal, preparing for the moment when he truly needed it all along. When he caught the opportunity like a wild fish, he would pull every secret out of him right away and hide any doubts just in case someone else saw what he was hiding. Fernan asked Berv to meet with Hyde because he called Lou from Bereave so that they could get busy, but the guy got sidetracked by his own laziness instead of helping him out. He waited patiently for a chance to return home before the master finally arrived at the door. Fernan asked himself whether he'd actually want to crush his own resolve, yet the answer wasn't in the words at all. He managed to control the outcome effortlessly, though he spent much of his energy pushing himself over the edge just for a moment before realizing it felt like an itch. The master of Hyde had a very serious problem. Fernan tells me things were fine at first, but later I find my head throbbing all day while the prophecy begins to show again. She stands in the sunlit courtyard with a sea of gold hair that rivals her golden sword, ready to face whatever challenge lies ahead. The prophecy promised that she would dance while the dark force watched, only to realize later that her broken wings meant she could not truly stand against them. The Fellenberg family was the one who broke the girl's chains because they had to help her get freedom. Fernan wonders if this is exactly why he'll never forgive her for being so mean again. The girl watches the curse happen, her heart pounding as she waits for him. He froze in his chair, staring at the floor as if he'd been speaking to someone who shouldn't be there. Fernan Fellenberg was thinking about why he'd left her alone that day until he finally called back, saying she wasn't coming back yet. He was mad because he felt his own spirit was being crushed by her. Fernan stares out the window, as if to hear the sharp, cold irritation of the Birch family sitting on his porch, wondering how they managed to stay so far above him. The mighty family stands as a steadfast guardian on the northern frontier of the empire, holding an unshakable position among the 7 rulers of power. Yet, in stark contrast to their strength, rising monstrous waves have wreaked havoc and destroyed everything they touched with such force that they must now flee into hiding for safety. The ruins of the fortress rolled down the hill as the soldiers lost their courage, leaving Berv in a desperate need for cash to finally make his escape. They sold away all their gold and power, so suddenly a stranger stepped forward to talk to Berv, the big brother from Fellenberg. The Fellenbergs have amazing magic, yet their fencing is terrible, even when they desperately want to fix it. They slipped through the void of annihilation, yet they still suffered every single year, so they believed pushing even a tiny bit harder could finally crack the barrier to let them unleash their magic. Luina wasn't just anyone. She was the one person who truly deserved to be A's best friend. He looked around thinking, I guess this guy really wants everything, even if he thinks it's about saving the world. He's got a special bond with A, so he knows he can't turn off the love for her easily. He was surprised to hear that the girl had shown up so early, though he apologized for past mistakes because she had wandered off mid-conversation during his talk about yesterday. As she spoke, she pointed out that the cruel injustice happens most often when things go wrong. Fernan stammers about never saying goodbye to the girl, yet she insists he called her there even though he meant something different. Fernan tells her she already knows everything and then decides to ask for a small favor in return. In the first step of this plan, he warned that a bridge would connect the magical department to the knights. Yet Lua simply refused before he finished his line. She asked herself, what if I let him win? And then I want to know exactly why this is pointless after he joins me. Fernan warned that if she keeps this partnership going for 3 more years, his money stash will grow even bigger with every new year. Fernan said he had to accept Fern as a sponsor before he could answer her question about why the junction mattered, even though she insisted it wasn't. But he's hoping she'll be his partner and a sponsor too, even if that means being part of the fencing team. Fernan laughs as he tells his family how much they've saved him while knowing his life is far down from what they could expect for someone like them. It's not like she gets any special perks for doing that. She wanted to put money away for her family's future, and the only reason Lua was even listening to her about investing was because nobles rarely do it. She knew he would just tell her no. She thinks her loyalty matters, so when he tells them families can have high ranks like a noble family status, he realizes it isn't about being more important than they are. His own honor cannot match the grandeur of an ancient royalty, even though both carry weight and respect. It feels like a direct insult to her when someone like him points out how the Armenian family offended him. But Fernan laughs because for him, even a small act of disrespect from another family is nothing compared to what he's feeling inside right now. Even though she dislikes him, she still accepts the truth that he hasn't lied about her talent. She stepped onto the stage with a blade that seemed to make its own music, looking incredibly noble and beautiful to everyone around her. Thinking about whether she would actually say no when someone recognized her talent, she looked at him with a hopeful smile. Fernan blinked and said, "What do you mean?" while she pressed her hands up in a gesture of firm warning against forgetting the lesson. She started spilling all her praise over his shoulder, but Luna's smile broke as she realized the mistake. Fernan said, "I really don't know how to handle this." He shouted how he couldn't find the perfect words to describe her dancing until she agreed to be his partner. The maid was reading a sponsorship contract in the room that would never go public. She was happy when she found out most of the classes ended right before she got her job as her college roommate for 3 years. Luina laughed at how perfect the rules were for her, then raised his hand and declared a stunning performance of his sword dance, calling it something supremely noble and life-affirming. He tried to speak, but could only whisper a few words, so Luna gently told him to stop talking about it while she was busy washing the things off the table. The maid whispered, "That hair's been playing tricks on you." Lena whispered the truth about her heartbreak, knowing she couldn't let anyone see how fragile she felt. Instead of hiding it away, she chose to stay strong by loving her family even when things went wrong. Fernan stood in the doorway as Hyde stepped out from behind the curtain, declaring he wanted to see his young master. Meanwhile, the maid shouted with pride that she had been pushed second and only Fernan held the top spot at 10th. He promised to stay at the training field until his friend arrived, ready to be right back in time. The maid said she would ask Lady Lee, and Lua was baffled by the thought she never imagined him planning anything at all. Fernan looked down at his list, feeling proud for being second place, only to smile as he realized that his rival Alan Donids was actually the absolute king here. Alan had never lost a single battle against her and was currently leading all of France with an untouchable talent, making him one of the very best royal knights on any continent. She will find out very quickly if there are any secrets waiting for her. Luina strolls up beside the table, whispering that she doesn't grasp what's going on yet, and asks if anyone knows what it means. Fernan smiled and said, "I really just wanted to prove I didn't do terribly compared to her, because if she thought we're nothing, then she'd never see how great our partnership could be." Fernan nodded seriously while watching her climb up the leaderboard, knowing that despite her perfect spot in top 10, she could still be far behind anyone truly capable of reaching it. Luina agreed that since he wanted this, he should go ahead and prove it. She let him strike first. Then Fernand summoned his staff, creating a wall of stone magic above her as he began to conjure the fragments at the swordswoman's feet, but drawing her sword cut them in half. The rogue Lua laughs, knowing that a spell of light is about to cut down every step toward defeating the dangerous mage. She caught him screaming as he tore through the grassy field, causing a sudden bolt of electricity to strike and shatter her footing. She knew he stood right behind her like an invisible guard, and she wanted him to be the one to let her go. In the thick of an epic battle, He prepared a massive magical beast to crush every enemy he came upon. The story says Lua didn't have any regular magic behind the scenes. Everything was just magic in itself. She finally understood exactly why Fernan had been acting out the way he did. He spent years keeping a secret about how great he was. She floats perfectly atop the ruined fortress as she steps forward into battle. Luna jumps over the trap to ask why he's summoning so many high-level spells at once, wanting to know just how much mana that wizard uses. He sure didn't know how good he was at being the number 10 player, so he totally underestimating his rival. For now, she was almost losing the release of her incredible strength. Fernan felt truly impressed and offered a warm, genuine smile. The field's very edges were already painted with magic spells, and that was all before the fight started between Luina and her own sword. Fernan and his team were charged with a fall when they landed hard on the grass. The protagonist stepped forward and said, "I surrender." Luina asked the man if he was trying to trick her, but he merely said no, and his magical energy had finally run out. The mage, who had no magic power to fight a tough knight, just laughed and said, "Oh, you fool. I've already drained my own supplies." So the girl realized he wasn't faking it. He was actually running out of mana himself and couldn't even win this battle. And since she hit him with every blow, victory went straight to her hands. She's really wondering what makes her feel so sick right now. Fernan gently warned him he had a secret gift waiting for her. She reached out for his hand, thinking about what she had been promised to get, a chocolate bar that would finally make him feel special again. She could taste the rich whiskey in her mouth, but if she dislikes it, he'd swap that sweet treat for a classic chocolate cake made fresh at the forest floor or another special flavor from the Frasier Kingdom. Fernan stepped back to let him look over the list of the highest achieving students, realizing how much closer it was to his own destiny than it seemed after checking their past records and talking about her. It's so rude to give chocolate just because someone won the match. Fernan jokes that he won't force her to take the gift, but the girl takes it from his hand before she asks him to wait a moment. She says he has enough mana to make brute attacks happen on his own unilaterally, so he is forced to stop and go into his limit. He asked himself how he could pretend to hold that power if his heart was screaming for the truth. Fernan tells him he can't see how a merchant would step onto the spotlight. Back in the room, Hyde asked what happened there, knowing his mana storage had completely shattered and his amplifier was broken. Fernan responded by saying he had dueled with Luina, who was very strong, but Hyde had already prepared himself and lost everything. And not just that, Fernan had spent all her mana on it. Hyde then questioned how to use those precious items and if she was truly worth as much. The guy said his job was to make money for the future, so he asked himself whether turning into electricity had been a bad side effect. Fernan watched as the referee didn't scold his opponent for a bad cut. Instead, he found the fencing technique spotless and knew exactly why the match felt so special to him. And Luina really knows what the real game is all about, wondering why she never took the top prize, whether that was just because her gear wasn't strong enough to win. When questions came in regarding what the Duke would tell him about the secret fencing, Burv was so excited that he felt like a top-secret agent waiting for a letter. Fernan worried because his dad might disown him if they messed up plans and even denied it, but he decided to send a letter first before getting hurt. That way, when he read it, wild thoughts took over, and the anxiety made him try to ignore them for days, until finally a reply came from his father. Fernan laughed as the news hit him, but Hyde immediately snapped back, saying, "It did happen." The protagonist asked himself whether his father had ever asked him to separate any message, only to be denied by the secretary, who warned he felt like he'd reach his last day serving the young master. Fernan replied that it wasn't his fault because he should have been rejected due to having consorted with a demon. So the accident wasn't specifically tied to that event. Therefore, I think everything remains okay. He whispers urgently, realizing he's on the brink of breaking a holy promise when suddenly the prophecies book appears right before his face, making him realize he can't lie about what happened next. The secretary ordered him to go where his lady-in-waiting was already waiting, so Fernan realized he couldn't prove the prophecy's truth himself. If the truth comes out, your dad won't let him hide. Instead, he'll snap and say they were fools who tried to break the family together. She needed to give him something so he could feel better about losing his job as a teacher. My dad told me his son looks very much like a normal person when I ask him if he's been drinking too much or completely lost his mind, but it was actually the demon who stopped fighting for him. Fernan said he'd finally put some extra cash into the Burvs for a solid return. The dad asks if a secret game is any fun when his kid says they can't do anything else. The family leader told Fernan it wasn't a request, so now he's been turned into a sinner who wants to ruin their fortune. Fernan agreed that he knew his own thoughts, but still wouldn't trust the Birchup, and if he did, he'd bring something better than secret fencing. His dad says he'd say that again, hoping to find out who gave him that sense of bravery. Fernan repeats that he cannot tell. His father replies with a scoff that the idea of being reckless is absurd and confirms he never taught him to do it anyway, while the protagonist insists on mentioning the prophecy just like that. He didn't mean to do it, yet he had no other option. Instead of admitting recklessness, he politely turned the table and said it wasn't really that bad after all. He takes total charge of the issue and hands over every piece of data he's got plus his own smart team. Yvonne says she doubts it yet, though he insists he should move forward and wants her to tell him what you have. Fernan told us about a mysterious crystal mine hidden right behind the Ares Peaks, just inside Donuts Land. His dad said he'd never seen this before and got mad when people argued about which kids are smarter or if the smart kids were actually better being kids. Fernan said, "Thanks for finding the coin. Ares isn't just a town. It's a gold mine where every lost coin turns into profit, making this spot truly worth the effort. Magic stones aren't just rocks. They're treasures hidden in the earth full of hidden mana, which is why they sell for a fortune." He's still standing there staring at the giant box, but he hasn't even started to touch it yet. Perhaps that moment buys us a little more time. He told everyone that his truck carrying a package from Donut had gone wrong because of the hurricane, and his entire company's plans weren't going well either. The miners could grab the heavy lead with a flash of light as they waited for the moment everything would fall into place, knowing that some secrets are hidden just beneath the surface of the earth. Vivian said the moment everything was right, she could let the damage go but couldn't wait until her son finished school before calling back to get a chance. Fernan thought Vivian had silenced all of them by extinguishing her anger and shortening her life expectancy. Fernan called out from the room behind him as Yvonne began her call, which caught his attention as he watched her leave. His son asked, "Did I do anything wrong?" His dad laughed and said, "Well, since you went to the club, we've got to grab a table and eat." The door shut quietly, and Yavin sighed softly, wondering why the little turtle hadn't even noticed what Fernan had actually seen. His secretary apologized and said he'd check it back later. The old man looked down at his young son and asked if he had any ideas about being a good father to him. The secretary laughed, saying that even though they might not have the best relationships, they would still make a very respectable merchant. The dad says he's still scratching his head over that question and tells everyone to watch him grow up as a soldier while learning from his squad. They might be the ones who actually work with these precious stones. The secretary asked if the golden pillar was real, and Fernan replied proudly that he knew exactly how valuable this piece of or actually is. It's that specific reason why he chose earth magic over his fiery one. Of course, they need to check their records first, then see how the young master might have that golden pillar to make things grow beyond expectations if he's right. Yvonne insists on being interested, but it was truly extraordinary, so the secretary should also dig into Louina Berv and see if she seduced her son. The secretary asked if the couple was truly in love, but Yavin calmly said no reason existed for investing money into something they didn't want to do, yet his eyes seemed to glow with a deep, unspoken passion that made him feel like he belonged to a very special time. He felt like the world was ending because his son loved so much more than his dad. Fernan is talking about Alia teaming up with Carlos Denave, when the news that Lunia is confirming gets loud in their face. She told her boss she started with a low score, and then the other girl claimed she was actually fifth before they both said their real numbers were wrong. Fernan's heart feels like a drumbeat, and he asks himself, why do we get together? And does that matter at all? Lunia spoke up firmly because she knew everyone else was going to see the truth, even though it made sense to keep her own plans hidden. Yet, she felt no shame in admitting that this decision had been the right choice. Fernan said it was all about money, yet he loved it so much because Luna hated his name as a money demon, making her dislike him even more than anyone else. The protagonist reaches for the potion and checks if she has a coupon right in front of her. He showed them how the special blade came from those strange roots and promised they could get a big deal for their new money. Linnea sighs, thinking about how much money she could spend if she only had a little more cash, while Fernan gently reminds her that he always remembers his original contract before it got too big for them both. She told everyone that even the Gold Turtle's creations were way too much of a present for anyone to take. Fernan stood tall and looked away as the truth came crashing down on him. He kept thinking she was right all along, only to find out earlier than anyone expected. Luna decided that taking her money to help others was worth more than staying rich. So she says no. She's saying if she breaks up with a sponsor, they'll get fined on their job, but then she lets go. Fernan stood up and said, I'd be thrilled to see her right away, but this moment matters so much that I can't keep it to myself. Luna thought about the deal, realizing how much money she'd have to pay just to pretend it was free. Did anyone mention a hidden rule in the deal? Nope, it really didn't exist. Fernan sat in her room, looking around nervously as if he needed more proof before giving up on the fencing game with the girl he was trying to seduce. But she wanted to know why she had been given these precious items and was desperately trying to convince him to take them back instead of stealing this fencing, a plan that would never let him succeed in any way at all. He felt like he'd been through a long, intense fight, and now he's just warming up his arm after all those years of battling. Those brave heroes at the top level showed up with cool, friendly duels and followed a prophecy that said they should become heroes who save the world. So they got really famous and even earned the sword's ego for winning. He looked up as someone stepped forward, trying to figure out how it felt to see those two people standing right there. Fernan asks why His Majesty hasn't spoken about his son for so long, yet the prince insists this is just too much time. Fernan wonders whether anyone else has noticed something special or if there's a new student arriving who catches his eye. Fernan sits down and asks, "Are you still tracking those scores?" If that royal heir shows up to meet his friend, the prince agrees and confirms their connection belongs to an ancient imperial lineage. Fernan smiles at the ancient memory of his great-grandfather's time in this long-forgotten land and recalls how he once saw him lead another kingdom away from its own roots. They spent hundreds of years ruling because their parents got elected to be the imperial family, even though they are both Armenian and now don't like each other very much. Also, Ledger likes authority above all others, so he won't let anyone hurt him. Ledger asked if anyone else was in the room when he spotted a mysterious figure named Vernon Calbender standing near him, making him wonder if it was just another person or something far more significant waiting for an explanation. He walked into class as the top runner-up for the year, watching Fernan reflect on how the Calbenders were cheating him out of Armenia while he thought his own connection might start exactly where they did. Every great hero has a secret enemy that wants to take over and make them forget who they were. The villain Von Calbender came out of nowhere as the next boss in his scary series. An instructor calls for a man named Arthur, while Fernan reflects that Ludger and his servant Vaughn were at the same spot at the start of the journey, wondering if it's destiny because it turned out to be truly interesting and he must check now just in case the prophecy will prove that he was on the right path. The teacher launches a fierce battle where and charges forward in big steps until she's nearly out of breath. A sharp sound of thunder shakes the room. A quickly runs forward to catch a falling piece of wood before it can strike him again. A rival slashes his sword with a magical blast to clear the path. Yet he stumbles backward as a graceful aerial dodge knocks him off balance and crashes into the earth before he can breathe fully. Fernan shouted, "It wasn't boring," as he made a downward cut through Anton's shirt to sever it with just one sharp move, causing both Ludger and Vaughn to gasp in surprise at his sudden aggression and confusion. As soon as he speaks with calm confidence, everything instantly shifts into action. He whispered loudly about how he finally won the championship game against his rival by pulling back all his magic, then turned to the crowd and said, "I'm not going anywhere." The girl in the corner whispered that her guess had been a bit short, yet Anto was going to win. Ledger noted it was quite odd when a person at number 38 was forced to show off their own birth name to someone who only had rank 10. Even though nobody had the talent to make him succeed, Fernan still showed up there trying his best, but he knew he wouldn't be able to help anyone else either. Fernan stared at a block blocking his own sword, feeling the weight of the counterattack on his back as he realized how perfectly the world had ignored him for years. Isn't Armian a bit of a hero? The ancient prophecy chose him as the hero, making him the star player in this new world. The ancient swordsman pushed his weapon deep into the dirt as he fell over the edge of the cliff, with no chance for him to pull it out before time had run out. The class celebrated as the winning student raised his glowing sword to honor the Armenian champion. The whole class erupted because he clearly didn't win the fight. He looked at his reflection, knowing perfectly that everything made sense. The prophecy had been right, and he hadn't messed up his own move. He just needs a few more steps to help him reach his full potential, so he can become her true friend before finally winning Luna along the way. Another class filled with students wondered whether they actually formed a pair and why the character named Luina decided to accept it. He was flattered he could hear his girlfriend talk so loudly now, even though the others had been watching him all along, but his heart wasn't quite at peace with it. Did he ask himself if she actually drank the potion or adjusted her gear to see if that worked? She smiled up at Wen with a grin, realizing how much fun the whole group was having and saying, it didn't really sound like a big deal. The teacher walks into the room and checks out every single student to make sure they're all showing up for class. Everyone looked at each other and decided they were okay. Nobody got stuck behind a door or rushing home on time. She beams into the room, introducing herself as Professor Rosalia of Magic and also as Professor Grad of Fencing. The class began right away, and every student instantly received their teacher's help with the map. The first activity was a real-life workout session. Grad said that showing off their new skills was not the best idea, so they were forced to go back into the actual training ground today. This map the guy prepared showed where the boat would land them at 3 hours' notice. They could arrive at the party without worrying about being exactly on schedule, because 4 hours was perfectly fine after all. He opens up his space for questions, and a student asks what might affect their final results. Grad answered the class as the most crucial lesson for the final exam, because another student asked if she'd fight against Rosalia, spurring a warning about extra points to go along with it. So the silence was long enough for them to move straight ahead without a moment of pause. As Luna and Fern strolled down the street, they exchanged a warm greeting before stepping forward together with a big smile for each other. The protagonist asked exactly where they had been, while the girl explained that it's time for them to pause, thinking about how they must see this map until they finally meet up with her shy mage. Fernan laughs as he realizes that his friend didn't have a chance to talk about her high-ranking leftovers. Instead, the pair were stuck just below the top 70 in Lenina's questions and needed to figure out how to handle them before they got too busy dealing with 2 low-ranked leftovers themselves. Fernan decided to act exactly as he did last time when she walked away. So Lunia immediately checked for bonus points and got right into the map without hesitation. Fernan asked himself if making things even easier with magic would truly help, while asking if he's going to show them where they are hiding. Ned whispered fearfully as he realized he had no chance at all before Lunia jumped up gracefully with a sudden, sharp warning that the game wouldn't let them do it again. Fernan beams in awe as he sees his magic shine through the striking crowd. So, everyone got those spells off the map, and Fernan noted the assistants had cast one last offensive spell. Jane and Ned vanish before the professor even finishes his sentence, leaving him alone as everyone vanishes faster than expected. Rosalia says the fight was too exciting because nobody got hurt from the monsters, which made everyone want to see what happened next. Grad asks if there's a couple he wanted to meet. Rosalia then introduces the trio of Ludwig, Alan, and Carlos while introducing Alia to Ortega in her own way. It was the very best pair ever. Luina, Fern, and Fellenberg joined hands together in such a wonderful way. She felt like she was sitting on the edge of a cliff when Fernan told her there were no grades involved, so she laughed and said, "Well, at least I'm not doing it for money either." Rosalia laughed, admitting he had been wrong again, because the real issue was something far more important than numbers on a test sheet. No matter how much he wanted, he couldn't ask for a grade because he was never paired with Luina in the first place. Rosalia asked Grad if Fernan had ever been a 10th, but the answer was never in question because he had always been 10. He tried so hard that he barely moved past 10th place and scored flawless marks on paper, yet he still earned a few bad points during actual testing. She thought he wasn't interested in showing off, so she let him hide all his hidden energy. Rosalia smiled, saying she knew exactly which people had taken over the battlefield after all the fighting went wrong. Grad asked Rosalia if she noticed any of the weird kids around, but she said nothing because she wasn't really interested in them at all. The professor is curious because she refuses him. He asked her why he kept hidden Fernan on the rock, promising to reveal the mark near the northern coast if Luana warned him that the story was over, while she insists on keeping it secret despite his eager curiosity about his journey. Fernan jumps off the cliff, cheerfully announcing that the northern route is open because there's already a crowd waiting for him. Luina pauses as she watches her friend step forward and asks, "Is that really what you're thinking? They got a long way to go before we can hit that target." He lifts the enormous rock with a staff, and that's where it goes for good. A mysterious stranger steps forward claiming to have met them at the last moment and urgently asks for Fern and Fellenberg, while Lunia loudly protests that Carlos Dend is still threatening her from behind. The boy wondered why the teacher had spoken so much about doing real work when she wanted to walk away, because, in fact, it was all supposed to happen by chance. Lunia asks why he feels so angry, wondering if Fernand hurt his pride by losing the pair, though she thinks doing such things is too childish for Luna and expresses that she's not meant for anyone else entirely. The protagonist jokes that their actions are foolish, but Carlos gently tells him to stop being silly. The two of them are arguing that scoring more points means catching tough guys, yet they're forced to admit they can't stand by and let things unfold without fighting back. Fernan promised to be his friend and gave her the freedom to run wild when she was ready. Fernan lifts a dozen heavy rocks while Luna whispers to him that fighting alone isn't enough to stop them. She just keeps reminding him to get out of the way because they really aren't even moving in sync at all. The duo circles around them, and the protagonist says, "I'll trust you." Rosalia was standing right there in the deserted mountain area, her eyes fixed on a massive explosion looming over them as Grad stared at her question. "Have we already beaten those monsters?" The teacher said the students aren't visible here and need to check closer. The teacher said he had 2 pairs of comments about his class, so you could go along with them. But do they really have enough eyes to catch Fern and Fellenberg's true powers? Fernan lifts a shield during battle, letting Lunia glide forward so she can see him well enough to feel his supportive magic help her move just as the other duo does. She wonders how much of that ease comes from the support spell he casts on her instead of fighting alone. Fernan winks at Luina, causing her face to turn red with fury. The girl didn't dodge easily. Instead, she launched herself straight for the slash and hit him right in the chest. She stares at the other girl in a fight scene because she knows there's no time left for distraction, so she grabs her gun right away while the two girls clash. Lena's inner voice screams at the walls of her mind as she forces herself to hold onto every ounce of her power. Carlos strikes the air with a lightning bolt that snaps toward her like a sudden, magical strike. Luna watches as she pulls back the blade of her greatsword and steps forward with surprising confidence. Realizing she had stopped moving at all, Ilya smiled and said, "I've caught her." Luna sighs as she realizes the attack won't work against her shield when the enemy steps forward, leaving the blow stuck far away by the stone in between them. Suddenly, a glowing blue orb of code materialized right beside Fernan, making him feel startled as he stared at the strange digital presence. He smiled at her, realizing that their magic had grown from a shared moment yesterday, with each hand holding the exact same amount of space and feeling exactly the same warmth. Fernan made a strange sound when he asked her about her weight, because, of course, she wrote that information in her student report. She ducked under the heavy rock, whispering its weight away, promising she'd catch more details from her friend later. She decided to burn that student record too. Fernan is yelling because he's afraid the girl won't live if she moves too fast without holding onto the car properly. Linnea promised to help Alia, but ended up worrying about blocking Carlos, while Fernan complained that he rolled around too many times all along because he thought he saw a magical circle in the sky. Fernan wonders why Carlos isn't using his lightning skill because he knows he's too busy fighting that student. It turns out that very special attack has a massive, pillar-like light that spews out dozens of bolts all at once and crushes foes just as hard as the student. He's been told he's the best at his job, so he makes sure to research exactly how to stop him from doing it. Then the boy pulls out 2 softballs and whispers to himself, "Look at what I can do." Fernan steps into a magical valley and starts summoning power from the ground beneath him. Carlos was completely absorbed and unblinking in his intense focus on the task at hand. Fernan steps forward and sees a sudden gust of wind that seems to pull him into a dark room. He holds back a smile while the air inside begins to swirl again. Carlos stammered, trying his best to stop the explosion before it hit him hard. Fernan lets out a laugh as he tosses the magical balls, whispering they absorb mana, so he can keep them all for later, and that's not exactly cheap on his part, but it works pretty well anyway. Refined even better will make a great production deal. Yet Carlos screams, "That's just cowardice." Fernan asks if cowardice exists and insists it is genuine practice, exactly as the teacher declared. Luina stepped in front of Carlos as he turned around, ready for the next move. She turns off the light so she can finally get ready for the big day. She danced with a blade in front of Alia's eyes, letting the air she generated move like a living weapon through his chest. From afar, Ludger and his partner watched the battle unfold in slow motion. The prince notes only 2 out of 4 are left, and Alan assures the crowd he will bring everyone all the way home. No magician stood between Carlos and his magical spell. The ledger told them Fernan and Bereave held so much power that Fernan would never have to hide his true strength again. Fernan isn't ready to catch up with Burr's relentless streak on top of grades. He'll have to rely on his real powers for that boost. He keeps everyone inside his circle safe from falling down, even though they could easily turn into rivals if that happened. The pair was already gone long before he could finish telling the story. Luina, Fern, and Philenberg are all about to be caught by the police. They sliced the giant troll in 2 with all their might. Fernan ignored the friendly tone of Lua comments as she dragged herself toward the monster, realizing that if she got there quickly enough, she could just be one of them. Fernan explained that troll blood wasn't just a random potion ingredient. She actually asked if it was truly essential because he knew exactly what it was for his spells. She said the news made her feel useless because, when you look at how rich he is, calling him a madman just sounds silly. Fernan laughed as he spotted the empty board while his partner tried to get back to work, knowing it was about time for them to lose again. She knows she's still got a solid reason to stay in that position as the top student. Fernan said to her that his heart was pounding so hard that he thought she might be hitting everyone with those 200 pairs of gloves, but it was just a feeling, not an attack. Fernan and Luina fought through the storm with incredible strength. Alan dashes forward, his heart hammering against his ribs as he races toward her. Luina watches the moment he strikes, ready to see if she can catch the last glimpse of his face before he runs off. They swung both weapons and met every single blow they could muster. The universe felt like a big, angry wall trying to push away your friend. They bounced back and forward toward one another, exchanging powerful sparks of energy in the air before their blades finally meet. From miles away, Ledger lifts himself into the air and grabs a massive fireball, while Fernan's strong earth magic stops it from ever being called out. Alan grabs the magical wand and lets Fernan take every drop of power he has left to hold the key to the vault. As if both of those magic blasts weren't meant to hit, they all smash together at once. A colossal blast rips through the battlefield, unleashing an unimaginable amount of power that shakes the ground beneath everything. The Ledger muttered he'd be watching, but his voice cut short as a handful of people rushed past him in seconds instead of waiting. Fernan looked around as the coach said, "If he really is going to go there, it doesn't feel right," which made him hesitate before answering the question about whether Fernan was actually ready to compete again. Ledger's words weren't about reality. They were a promise to settle the matter peaceably instead of letting things go wrong. It was almost exactly 1 hour left when the fight started, and everyone realized that if they fought right away, nobody would ever notice you checking. Alan stepped up to the microphone and asked, "But I think you're right. You should win first." He then turned back around and asked, "And what's the point of asking me?" The girl, Luna, decided not to quit after losing the game, but wanted to be first place instead, so her friend Fernan nodded enthusiastically. Ledger told us that his company couldn't reach a deal because everything had turned out wrong. He grabbed his wand and ignited the flames, shouting that Fernan had something special for him to find out. He shouts to the prince and says his heart won't let him hold back, but a swirling magic circle lifts up and down, holding the ground in its magical grip. Fernan waved his wand high in the sky, but the boys screamed as if it were a deadly trap. They had no choice but to run away. Alan and Ludger get stuck in a pile of stones while the world ends around them. Fernan asks himself whether he ought to move forward, while Lunia looks quite impressed with the idea. She pauses near the marked spot and asks why he hasn't tried this trick before yet. With the test finished, Grad cheered for everyone's hard work and promised to tell the class about their new position soon. First up was Luina Berv and Fernan Fillenberg. Ludger Schwaben and Alan Dinerates took the spot in second place. Fernan tells the story about how they made it. Lunia notes that everyone said they were both great and couldn't beat Alan, but honestly, she wasn't surprised at all when he told her it was a first ever win, despite failing to knock out any opponents. Lunia breathed in a deep breath of pure joy as she realized her first encounter with the world had been truly remarkable. Grad tells them he's about to finish the exam and returns home fast, so they don't leave until he's done with it. Lunia wonders if Arian is a stranger to her because he didn't appear yesterday and only mentioned meeting him earlier this week. Fernan asked her if she had seen him, and she replied that he looked like the guy who did the sword dance back then, so he felt his head hurt just watching him do it. Did Lunia ask what that was? He felt like a giant prophecy was coming and decided to tell everyone what's next. He's staring at that new page, wondering if the story has somehow changed since yesterday. Luna laughed loudly when it shouted, "Don't call me a knight," for no reason at all. She just said she didn't take on the role of his protector because fighting was her real destiny and it wasn't time to hide behind a shield anymore. Fernan watches as her hand shoots past the dark door of Andromelius, wondering if the transformation is still happening inside his own mind. Lunia woke up at the hospital, screaming as she heard someone call out from the dark hallway with a loud curse that the rich Fellenberg gang had tried to smash their Borka family's heads off while they cried in pain about what they did to them. Fernan snaps back into reality because he thought he'd been too bold in front of his son, only to realize the mistake when he steps out of the dream again. Did Luna ask him if he was okay when he fell so hard that she wanted to check if he was sick? He told the news and said, "I'm okay." Rosalia was staring at his name card while Grad whispered that he needed more power than he already had. Fernan wonders if Arion has finally caught up with him, yet he still needs to figure out why suddenly another prophecy is coming along for Luina's revenge. In a futuristic carriage, High greets Andromelius with genuine pride as he proudly declares his position among the 72 demons who have made their mark on this new world. Fernan was shouting about how much energy he had spent before he finally told Hyde the hard truth. The villain would only wake up if they got to the Labitus at exactly 9 p.m., so they must sleep now or else they'll wake him right then and there. Fernan sits back as the carriage keeps rolling by, staring at Andromaeus, who is trapped in that terrifying snake-shaped body of black hair that frames his face so perfectly that Fernan can't help but wonder if this demon is just trying to hide from the road. That magical moment when the ancient gods disappeared into the clouds left no trace for anyone who dared look back. I made sure that nothing happened without the help of anyone else. Luina stumbled back as she slipped on the mud, realizing her legs were gone in a single, painful step. Fernan doubts whether he should whisper a secret to Luina, who is now asking if he feels better after being so kind before him. She asks him why she cares about demons when he says he only wants to hear out what she thinks about them. Fernan smiles over her shoulder while saying, "I'll just tell you straight, But Lua nods happily at the end, knowing that whatever they say about history is already fixed in the past. She said her friend found something amazing too. They really do live here all these days. She asked if he had landed his head in a training fight, but Fernan dismissed it as a mere misdirection for her to prove that someone possessed demonic power. 1 month from now, during the first year of this night class training, Vernon Calberton would lose a fight and become the second best student on the team. After that moment, no one could face him except the enemy, who had lost many things to his reputation, honor, and all his supporters behind him. He finally fell asleep, but his dream wasn't quiet. It had full-blown demons in it. And then, suddenly, a shadowy figure stepped into the dark room as if it were waiting for someone to arrive from nowhere. If you use that moment right, your chances of convincing others to help will get much better. But knowing that solid proof, he turned this into the key to expanding his own big plan. It wasn't funny because he didn't know where or how to get his magic gone, so he couldn't figure out what else was wrong with himself. Didn't the paper say that Phillenberg would expect it to read? Verve continues to hold immense prestige despite military claims. Yet she remains a hero so well-loved that people simply believe she helped Phillenberg succeed without anyone else doing anything. Although they had a chance to make friends with each other, he would rather stay near that one man who was his true friend than join them in their struggles together. He remembered the day when his own ego, who thought he'd been dead long enough, decided to demand money from someone who actually loved him back. The German president had to try to connect with Armenia, but he didn't know where to start. They wouldn't talk about their feelings directly and would keep him at bay until he felt safe enough. Fernan's sudden appearance was so wild he made the whole family feel like a disaster, proving that some things simply don't add up when they happen without context. He's telling lies about how things happened, but he doesn't care if they're true or false because his anger at what happened is just as important. That old man didn't believe Fernan's kindness, for he thought Fernan was just trying to get something while he arrived for the first time. When that moment happened, he handed Fernan a potion even though he knew the boy had been hurt by a monster back then. And he looked almost like a real man who couldn't calculate anything, making his worries seem much more serious than they actually were. Giving $1 feels like stealing gold when honesty can't be traded in cash. The ego screams that the whole world felt like a total disaster. Even the last emperor admitted he was in trouble financially, yet he still managed to purchase a simple meal for himself. The Fellenberg is a kind-hearted person who will never say anything, so just wait until they're done talking again before you come back to ask them if they want to see you at the dormitory. Hyde told his young master he's so busy taking over the merchant guild while he studies hard. He apologized and said, "I'm not here as a visitor, but I was an Ariana who came to see me." A secretary whispered the news to a friend who was too caught up in his own pride, then left to do something else while another guy argued about how he should pay the bill when things just got out of hand. Fernan stared as if he hadn't expected such an unseasoned trick to land in his mouth. Hidalgo walks in, whispering that his boss isn't returning yet and asking why he sent someone back, while Fernan laughs about seeing him again. He could not stop smiling because his heart kept beating with all that sadness from before. He felt too much like returning to get something he might not actually love now, so he didn't send him away. Hades wonders if that long journey really made sense when trying to save his dying nephew. Fernan laughed and said, "I have so many amazing qualities and am the best one in my group." Hilda asks herself if she'll lose her hand if Fernan gives her the key back today, and Fernan replies that there's a way to get it now. He should venture out to the lower families to gather every single elixir, because the cost alone makes that offering a big financial sacrifice for Hyde. Fernan said that giving a more expensive gift was not about money, since a lack of funds would mean he couldn't afford even one more thing. He then asked to know if he had met Butler of the Phillenberg family. He's telling himself how rude he was when he told him the truth about sending him away. Yet Ain't reminds him that he handed over this box with a note, even though he wanted to know exactly what kind of apology came along with it. Ego yells. He laughs at me because he ends every line with sunbed. A stranger isn't looking for the elixir because he's getting startled. A confused Ego stares at the sky where a holy bird's heart rests, offering an army sword master a weapon so strong even the bright sunlight can't hurt it. Fernan was a very thoughtful man, so seeing him again made the day go much smoother. He said it was unbelievable that anyone could really take in such a person and go out of their way to get closer to what he wanted for everyone else. So he decided to do all the same things to make sure Sunba had everything he wanted. Fernan asked himself in a few days if the outcome had changed. He says Hyde won't be able to defeat Vin Calbender. It wasn't much better than that. Armin's shadow felt stronger than the sword he held. Fernan sighed and looked at the sky, wondering if the prophecy would still come true. Fernan asks why he feels different when he uses that special drink, but then Fernan says the potion actually made his mood feel a little better instead. Hyde wondered if Armian could still make his move against the elixir, even though he knew it looked scary. Fernan whispers the words he believes will never be told. Yet his heart tells him the prophecy once said defeat was inevitable for Vin. He got caught in the middle of a moment where everything about his life seemed to vanish as a demon took over, giving him an instant chance to gather undeniable evidence for himself. Fernan whispers quietly, so the villain knows he's watching over Vin right now, before going away. He insists on watching any place he goes, even if someone he knows calls him, his friends call him, or he talks to them, because he can't let it stop him from being there. Fernan feels a heavy weight over his head because he can't forget the boy who taught him how to be brave. It has been 2 weeks since the man began watching Vin, yet still no change occurred. He didn't seem too happy about the trouble, but he still wanted to check if someone named Hyde was doing some kind of work. It wasn't just that part of the prophecy that scared him, it was that part that actually made his heart beat faster, and he'd choose to follow it anyway. After being knocked down by a giant, he scrambled back from the floor and looked desperately into the middle of the exam hall, waiting for the answer or even the other candidates who couldn't see him. Whoa! The battle's result was already set long before anyone else could see the final blow. He wasn't careless anymore because he'd seen everyone he had ever met before. The proud figure who once ruled was now stuck with a heavy burden, yet he still held his own despite everything. Did a stranger leave Vaughn behind when he wasn't sure if they'd come? A dark shadow began to creep into him, slowly taking control of his soul as well. Fernan woke up in a daze and immediately began staring at his reflection. He wondered if the sun was rising or if time had truly begun. Yet he found himself caught in a strange dream of prophecies happening to him right here and now. He found himself exactly at the precise instant his friend, Vaughn, had been seized by a demon while they were taking their final exam. Today's midterm exam day felt like a storm, and he felt so scared that his heart skipped a beat every time he thought about failing. Hyde told his apprentice that he'd been so eager to wake up early that he decided the morning was all about eating before he even got out of bed. Fernan smiles and tells everyone he's ready to start working on his gear right now. He decided to watch his students' first-year exams while they waited for a special escort from Duke. Fernan is scaring Hyde about the secret he's hiding, but Hyde thinks he might be better off without a friend to share his secrets with. He told the truth about his friends, but when he got back to the shop, he felt a deep sadness because the person he loved was gone forever, even though he had spent all that cash on them to make their lives perfect. Fernan's words seemed to mean something important, so he asked his sister if she's actually studying hard for those exams, or if she just wants a distraction while he goes out there. But if she brings him along, the loan might grow for a few months later, which means she'll have to handle everything on her own now. Fernan asked what location had been left behind in that lonely, hillier area. The teacher hates seeing those old classes in the hall because new students are bringing back the bad habits, so she tells them to leave before they hurt anyone else's reputation. Fernan said, "I will let you in," while she mumbled something about having no mind, yet the professor arrived with the luggage, and the guy replied that he can bend things to your liking. Lunia decided that time was running out, so she would return home early. Fernan shouts, "We won't be caught breaking the rules. You have to keep your word." The girl looked down at the table and said, "It isn't what I thought. I just forgot my own sword." The boy asked her to hurry up, but he was still standing by the door. Fernan whispered, "I need a cloak of invisibility so I can stay hidden behind the teachers and assistants who won't notice." Luna says the bribe might work, so he has to make sure he knows exactly what she means. Fernan stood over her, watching the two runners race toward the finish line while he waited with a worried look in his eyes, wondering what was really going on behind them. Vaughn was third in the line of battle, but he wasn't sure whether he'd been fighting before even getting up near him. Then Luna sees he has chosen another route, but she immediately points out that following that specific path violates a rule about students getting access to a professor's map. Fernan whispers a soft promise that she must listen carefully as the night deepens before he touches her heart. The girl stared at the dark room and wondered why the great beast was making such a loud, sickly screech. They heard that scream again, and the silence stretched out like a heavy blanket before everyone turned back toward the sound. Lunia said she'd be ready to check up, as everyone else was rushing in from the front. Fernan watched her run with a worried look as the air felt thickly dangerous for her to be alone. It's a quiet moment where a little boy gently pulls his favorite toy along with him as he steps carefully down a winding trail by the side of the road. Lunia told the boy he looked completely lost after being knocked down by a monster, though the hero's quick defensive spells kept him from getting hurt at all. It was odd that those ancient beasts didn't show their usual ferocity. Fernan was stumped because he realized the storm started long before his own head even turned on its side. He had no time to verify whether Vernon was okay. She felt that heavy weight, and Luna asked herself why such an enormous explosion had occurred right before her eyes. She stares directly at the troll as he strides forward in front of her eyes. The brave girl managed to cut off the troll's arm with her mighty sword. The giant troll suddenly stands tall and rumbles his voice loud enough to make the whole village jump back in terror. A sudden rock bumps into Luna's hand as she pauses over her missing arm and thinks about why the force never seemed to stop. The hobbit's enchanted stone spikes were shot out of his hand and whipped wildly across the dark forest floor, trying to strike away the angry giants. Luna leaps toward a tree and gets stuck right by its roots, while the scary troll roars and swings back at her. Then she stood up and looked at Fernan, wondering if he knew what that beast did, while he said, "It's not painful. It's a terrifying beast that lives in a different world, but its final trick? To cut off its neck." Linnea wondered how Livia got so wild when she heard the prophecy said demons would come, and Fernan replied that the words had already been written on parchment before they even arrived at her house. As the professor and instructor struggled with a strange glitch in their system, Vaughn suddenly unleashed a dark force that shattered their defenses before they could even finish speaking. In the theater, when a crisis strikes everyone at once, people scramble to find their roles while one person simply says, "We'll handle this alone." As the crumbling map shows the world collapsing around him, Vaughn cries out in frustration about losing his job once more, while he watches from the safety of his car and begins to push him away gently as a new challenge unfolds. Armian shouts from the crowd as the referee blows his whistle, signaling that the fight ends and the match is officially decided. Vaughn stared at the words defeated that echoed back through his mind, a heavy silence waiting for an answer he could not hear. He thought he had already lost the competition for the princess's hand. If this turns out to be a mess, he'll surely get kicked out of the club and his job called off forever. The man clenched his hand tight and shouted, demanding an army's fight against him. He jumps up and leaps for him with all his might. The hero smiled at the monster whose hand was shaking until he could cut off his own arm, then grabbed the blade again and began swinging to try and free himself. The sword's pride wondered why it chose such a dangerous path over letting himself down for true glory. He was a wild, uncivilized killer with nothing left for a hero's honor, yet he refused to deny what the devil wanted of his soul. The knight groans over a mistake and says, "You're just a worm. You'll ruin everyone's pride," while his friend replies with a dismissive sigh, "Don't worry. We won't have any fights." Fernan and Lunia did their final battle with the berserker. She starts shouting about forgetting the potion before realizing it's not her turn anymore, so she gets right back in the middle of the fight just because nobody else is there. Fernan stammers about choosing his next move because everyone else is fleeing a swarm of monsters while Luna shudders at how mad she sounds calling him crazy. She laughed, knowing that winning the battle against the berserkers wasn't as tough as she thought. Fernan hesitated while Luna asked him why the man was waiting for an escort instead of a ride himself. A girl tells you to forget all your worries about her drink, even though the wine tastes just as good as his old coffee, so she runs off screaming that it's way more valuable than anything else. Lunia wandered off into a distant village and asked herself, "Is that the home where the ancient brew went to die?" Vernon looked down at the fallen man and said, "Well, this fight's done." The world seemed to tilt when Luna noticed Vernon's body and told him she wouldn't try to get in his way. She moved closer and whispered the name of her friend, hoping he would tell her how he got hurt. Fernan stood ready by her side as she tried to stop the fight, but the hero refused, telling her to keep quiet and wait for his turn. A terrified girl yells for someone else to get out of the collapsing person and push them towards safety, while Vaughn rushes forward with surprising speed. It felt like a sudden rush of energy that made Lunia feel whatever was happening right then and step back quickly to stay safe. The girl stepped forward and shouted, "This aura? It's totally new." She looked around the room wide awake for a moment, realizing she didn't know what to call it yet. You knew whether that monster was actually Vaughn Cubenderer or something else. Fernan answers with a voice full of ancient power, while the girl immediately asks if he knows exactly what she means. His heart raced as he turned toward the door, whispering, "This guy's got a demon in his belly." He watched the boy asleep for a long time. Fernan thinks the prophecy tells him exactly how to begin his day. Right when he stirs, he'll be on his way back to the village. But the target's mind suddenly scrambled as Looney kept whispering about a demon. Yet Fernan watched in stunned disbelief, wondering if it was just his imagination or if he had actually left the world behind before now. The girl shouted that they had to crush Calbender before anyone else could move, yet the hero gently touched her arm and told her to stay there 10 minutes longer. She turns around, but she never sees where the main character hides from behind. Vince charged forward with a fierce momentum, knocking the girl back as the impact shook her body. Oh dear, she tries her best to pull him back to life. Vaughn pulls a massive slash from his sword, and suddenly the air around him shakes as he charges into the darkness. She held her ground against Luna's pressure, but realized the man wasn't broken. Now she'd be powerless if he didn't show a sign of strength. She pulls her invisible shield back, so hard it snaps against Vin's face. Suddenly, a dark figure drops from above and slams her hand into Vaughn's chest while spitting out screams of pain, forcing him to scream desperately as he tries to pull himself up. The demon screamed loudly and again for a few moments while the room went quiet. She pulls her blade hard, slicing the air as Luna ducks under the blow. Oh no! The demonic aura has taken control of the boy once more. Luna swings her sword, but suddenly the air around her is full of swirling light and magic. The two characters, who were just about to hit each other, suddenly felt the pull of their own weight. A dramatic clash of intense energy erupts into a massive blast that shakes the room around them. Luna hesitates, realizing her powerful aura is vanishing fast because of the dark magic swirling around it, so she's wondering just how to handle it now that there aren't much left. It wasn't clear how to find another path until she noticed something unusual about Vin. Fernan hears Luna calling out and starts shouting for Luna to hurry to him. When Vaughn spins around and lets out a sickening sound, the swordswoman leaps onto him as he runs ahead of her. Fernan told me it had to happen so fast as he spotted Luna running toward him, but she asked why he'd suddenly dash in the middle of the day about a strange thing that never happened before. Fernan shouted back that a demon had taken the form of a monster while Luna screamed, realizing he'd run away from saving her and leaving her in the dark as the ground grew cold under his feet. Fernan laughed nervously, warning that a trap would be set with Vaughn stepping into something full of mana right then and there. The stones start climbing up with such powerful force that they seem to float through the air before hitting the earth below. The spell of the magic circle shrouds Vaughn in an invisible trap as he hangs suspended in midair before he can even react. A magical blaze ignites beneath the earth, sending a fiery wave that shoots directly toward the dark figure trapped within. A voice named Luna whispers, "We don't even have to walk all the way there," while asking what if Calvender gets hurt. Fernan says he'll stop worrying about it now and tells her to watch closely, knowing the situation feels like they pushed him harder than ever before when Vaughn kicked out more energy. Fernan wasn't sure if Luna had spotted the danger during the fight, yet she knew he was still stubborn about using her weapon. He pulls back the veil of darkness and ignites a small burst of magic before he can stop himself. The fire seems to wrap the demon around itself, once more, as if they are trapped together. The mage finally completed his spell by summoning a giant flaming pillar around the demon, and then Vin crumbled to the earth instantly in response. Fernan announced that everything was going well on the operation, while Luna wondered whether spending high-cost gadgets for nothing was truly wasteful, and the boy replied that the matter didn't seem helpful at all. Fernan's angry words cut through the girl's story, which ended with a promise to defeat someone alone without those specific tools, leaving her shocked when he dismissed the threat as just too much demonic energy. Luna whispered, "It certainly seemed capable of destroying the world, but he is still Varen Calvender." The protagonist quickly realized what he had done because it was true that Ain't was the hero who would save the world, yet he still hadn't awakened his powers. Luna is already a natural force stronger than anyone in this fight. The monster's obsession with demons drove him crazy, leaving behind all the details he really needed about the battlefield. Luna whispered a warning to Fernan as he stared blankly at the void. Fernan's shadow looms over him as the villainy grows. The hero only laughs when he hears the cost of every move, and then the demon strikes hard from above, knocking him to the ground. The villain fell to the floor, and the hero shouted, "You're a wasted demon." Sometime later, when Vaughn stepped out of hiding, he saw a strange reflection in the glass and asked if it really was him because he couldn't be sure what had happened. Fernan smiled and said that the recording sphere looked exactly like that scene, but there was no way to forge anything with such precision. Vaughn then replied that he remembered nothing after fighting the enemy. Fernan sighed as the darkness swallowed him whole, claiming to have been possessed, yet Vaughn's gentle words about having never seen a real demon stopped his frantic search for proof just by looking around. He felt a sinking weight inside him as he realized he had been staring right at someone who hurt so badly he could barely stand up. Thousands of glowing magic arrows slammed into his chest, sending a wall of hellish fire up his back as he screamed in pain. He's still breathing because of the powerful power living inside him. Vaughn told the group to pull back all their weapons because they were scared of what was coming next. They had plenty of money already planned out, but Vaughn said he would cover every single one of those costs himself. The story starts with a character pretending to be under the weight of severe mental turmoil, even though his friend explains that they both understand exactly what's on their mind right now. Fernan said the real secret was that he'd simply need someone to sign it over for them, and everyone else would go away with nothing but a few words left behind. When Vaughn asked if his job wasn't really a slave contract, he couldn't stop looking at the terrible conditions that kept him there, even though the boss told him everything was fine. Vernon didn't like being told how to handle the mess. Instead, he decided to get rid of it all at once by telling people they had nothing left to do about it. He'll be forced to give up all those videos to the Inquisitors. The Emperor's Inquisition was a tight-knit group of priests working side by side to hunt down demons. The great cause that once ruled absolute power has now left its mark as mere history, turning into a silent, forgotten figure in time. Vernon is so upset because he thinks he has a real chance of coming back home, and he wants the ball too much. Vin is shouting that it really has nothing to do with demons. The main character screamed as if a bullet had fired inside him, knowing that Marth himself would also kick out his son for selling his soul. He walked into a sleigh and told the owner that the son is now his own hand. Linnea looks around at the dusty classroom and wonders if she can simply walk away without bothering the teachers yet. Fernan immediately stands up, shaking his head as he says, "No, it's not the right time for you to just do that. Even if Vaughn turns into a monster or gets tricked by others, nobody knows why he did that. And if a demon is making him obey someone inside the academy, that tells you exactly what's happening to him. This news story could go viral, but their private lives would remain shrouded in shadow while the public gets caught up in the chaos around them." The story starts with a script that tells an investigator why the targets are students. Fernan laughs and says, well, the Academy definitely holds some of the world's top talents. It's the one thing she thinks will destroy the entire empire when a demon strikes at any moment, and she claims she could save everyone by throwing them all into that future forever. Fernan looked at the sky with wide eyes, feeling a strange mix of awe and dread as he realized his promise to her had been completely lost in the wind. Oh no! The teacher and assistant got on a plane with 3 other people, but suddenly the plane crashed into a mountain range where they couldn't escape because no one had time to save them from the monsters or finish their exam alone. The whole year's quizzes got swapped for papers instead. The Academy divides grades by splitting them between practical skills and written tests, so you can never get away with just writing an exam as a punishment. It's not allowed at all. It sounds like the ego keeps thinking too hard, and even when all his thoughts are quieted down, something still feels weird in the moment. That monster's first move wasn't just a fight. It was a dramatic power play where a dangerous demon unleashed an unbreakable burst of cosmic energy to win the battle. The beast didn't even show up, and that question proves he's right. The voice in my head screamed about demons coming back exactly once, and I realized then why the first emperor had been waiting so patiently for him to show up. As the shadows began to lengthen and whisper threats of destruction, they were slowly inching toward him one last time. Fernan is screaming in the Labis Hall because his head is about to explode, while the H questions why he doesn't know and fears that the Armenian name engraved in his bones will make demons take over the world if he never lowers his guard under Fernan's leadership. The young master receives a prophecy and runs toward the southern forest. Finally, he enters a cave where a spiritual beast acts as his master, but it was too much for him to handle. As the giant monster vanished from sight, the crumbling earth beneath him opened up to reveal a hidden treasure buried deep within those ruins. The 2 giants found the gold so incredibly valuable that even their swords were gifted with magical power from the realm's own magic, allowing them both to live forever within the treasure itself. Fernan woke abruptly while staring at the glowing metal that seemed to hold his own lost soul together. Lunia's words were strange as she pointed out that once he'd mentioned this mysterious liquid, it has since become a common garden herb instead of something sacred to keep secret. Fernan said once it was a fake story, but today the news is real. Meanwhile, Linnea gets mad and tells him she'll miss class for a whole week. The character laughs as he sets out to prepare the class and promises to do everything right. Linnea refuses her friend's offer to learn more, yet the boy insists that his curiosity will grow even when they're all told the same good news about school today. Fern tells a friend they'll get help and clearly won't let them do something else. He walked in to find this was a long time since he last saw his brother, Fernan, and now that Mana is finally going where it's supposed to go, he felt sure everyone would understand everything soon. Luna instantly recognizes Jace Vines, because his quiet words mean so much more than just a name. They promise to be his best friend and his greatest blessing. Fernan asked if the school principal's son had been doing okay, but the teacher quickly told him everything was fine and wanted to ask about his studies instead. Jace keeps telling himself he's still in his first year and needs a lot of learning, which makes Linnea look completely bewildered. Fernan asked to see if the 2 were really so far apart, but she only looked surprised at all that was happening. Meanwhile, Jace said it must be something very natural. Linnea refuses to believe that Jacease Vines actually was a saint because she thinks the Church of the Dragon God is a dangerous place, yet she doesn't know who the real monster is hiding in there. Jace is shocked because the holy man he once trusted to save him looks like someone who wants all the gold in the world. The old priest of the dragon god loved his friends from Earth, but when they left for the moon, he forgot them entirely, and now he worships the very energy that keeps life going. So most of those people follow you not because they're mages, but because they've joined a great powerful group that has grown into something real. And if you want to become an archmage yourself, you need to get recognized by the Pope. Lunia pauses, looking at the word close, and asks herself if that word even makes sense in this world where distance matters more than connection. Jay said it because, since his church had been built with mages in it, he knew he needed lots of money for the new building. Luna asks if Fernan really is truly the saint, only to find out that while the Fellenbergs are the biggest supporters of the church with countless items made by their merchant guild, they also act like a wise elder who jokes that Fernan is still older than them. Jace laughed at the truth, and then changed his heart to think it was only a joke too. She sees how she feels about that connection right now, and knows she's ready to leave. Jace stares at the door as Lunio whispers a quiet no, saying she won't be pulling him into anything until his time comes. If she changes her mind, she's free to return, and the saint blesses her as she goes. Jace is stunned by her sudden departure when the protagonist finally says, "You need to gather those spiritual herbs." The saint felt a flutter of surprise at Fernan's question about stealing the spell, yet Jacees firmly denied the idea, insisting that gathering the magic was essential for his upcoming training session because his own abilities alone would make getting it so effortless. Fernan said he had done his best, though his luck wasn't with him and he still couldn't find the right place to meet. Technically, the prophecy gave us enough clues to find it, and there were actually 7 lakes right here in the south. He's been digging through every single lake in his entire journey for a long time, only to finally realize he still can't find any mithril on top of them. You could see through the wall of stone, but every time you went in, the noise from above just got louder and harder to hear. The boys in the classroom didn't want to go in because all of them were busy with other things, but Fernan said it was exactly that reason why he decided to join the team as an assistant. The young man kept repeating his words until he finally realized the rules were quite hard to meet. Fernan smiled up at the empty room while saying, "You shouldn't be helping a freshman, but I did manage it." Jace whispers excitedly to his friends as they look at the shiny new shop window and see a big smile on the merchant's face. So if Jesus says he's going to give tons of money, then God comes along to help him out. Fernan doubts his identity, while Jay's offer to show him a contract makes it seem like an easy escape. But the internal voice insists that this time he must work hard together with those rare spiritual plants in the eastern woods. He needed to pretend the thing looked like luck, so he'd start walking circles while someone asked if anyone was watching, and he would say, "Your son is right here." He looked like a real assistant when he heard the boss say the company had no funds at all. A whispers, "I'd like a few more points," and quickly leaves the room while Grad stops to warn him that the training begins 30 minutes later and his helpers must move immediately. He was complaining about a plan he had always dreamed of meeting with his friend Suinba, but it turned out he didn't want to go there at all. Elsewhere, Jacees had warned him about the dangerous rule. He couldn't dress her doll alone anymore, so his brother had to take a bite of his own blood instead. He poured a few drops onto the doll, and suddenly she looked exactly like him. Jace felt a thrill in his chest when someone pointed out how cleverly he could have been on top of his class, exactly like everything else in life. He always tried to use his magic to flee the Pope, so Fernan wonders if he's still going to do that. Jace's eyes sparkled with disbelief as he saw the truth about him. He wasn't hiding anything. He was simply a legendary, unbeatable mage who could never be tricked. It took him a few hours to figure out what was happening, and today he's still not certain about it either. The boy stood tall, feeling confident that he had made his own mistakes while confusing the most powerful wizard who ever walked on Earth. He knew this would be enough for everyone else. He will likely be the kind of friend a young man needs when he meets him later, yet he doesn't show up on the prophecy at all. He's also very smart and belongs to the Church of the Dragon God. Humans actually find demons and the church deeply annoying, so they're naturally quite disgusted by them. A loud scream from hell turned the local church into a place of terrible shame. It gets crazy fast after those first few steps, turning a church into something totally opposite to fight against demons for the next 5 hours before the bad guys come back. Fernan understood his warning, but kept counting on him as the sun went down. He leaps across the trees, watching over A as he realizes he's heading straight for Lake Farden, but there isn't any water left behind to watch him. He warned that it was finally his moment to speak. His commander said he had to get right at the command. The man standing right beside him was telling him he had seen Von Kalbender earlier, and now HT confirms that to him too. He wonders if it's worth trying once more, knowing he won't make a fool of himself, while Von thinks about his own lack of pretense and refuses to let the scene feel like a performance. Fernan felt his heart hammer against his ribs as he remembered the day when the training facility felt like a dark forest, and he knew he had to go back home immediately. Vaughn sighed quietly as the clock ticked down, realizing that even with all his time spent in battle, the enemy hadn't given up completely. The swordsman laughed as he saw the number in the ledger and said, "It doesn't matter if it's 200 or 1,000. Now he'll have to make a brave stand to finally win back his pride and glory. The spirit keeps fighting on, even after losing, and I never thought this would be such a beautiful moment for a brave knight to stand up." He shook his head and said, "Oh, right? It's not allowed for anyone to fight right next door." A proud swordsman said, "It really doesn't matter at all." He kept arguing that his honor was a thing of the past, claiming that true strength meant letting everyone win by beating up their own pride. The sword sighed, wondering why the knight was so embarrassed. Fernan watches from afar and thinks Vaughn is doing very well and should continue. He leaps down the branch, shouting to warn everyone that he's about to handle everything alone. The lake seemed vast and quiet as he wandered out of his own thoughts, wondering who might have been standing nearby. If the seeker goes looking for Mithil, there's no chance to hear any noise at all. He stared at the ceiling and wondered whether he could finally summon that last spark of magic before it ran out. He actually wanted that, so he figured out he had to go find Mithril right before arrives would be able to take him. He made sure his special gift worked perfectly by casting the ritual with a ready-made plan and calling in his trusted helper to help him do it all right. Magic tech is like a superpower that lets us mix and match any kind of spell with one simple move. The heart of every merchant was always trying to grab as much cash as they could. Fernan pulls out a giant golem and declares, "I am James now." He pulls the heavy chain and leads him right where his mithril hides in the dark. Vaughn yells, "I won't pass until I defeat him," while he sighs in annoyance, knowing that all the yelling has been just an act of childish behavior. Even though the boy only remembered what his master said, he waited for over an hour because nothing else happened in the house. The man asked what the other guy had to say, but the colleague protested that he loved doing these things all the time. Oh my God, he has absolutely the power to snap a whole family together. Oh, he was so eager. So quickly you had to rush him out of the way before he could even think about staying back. The boy kicked the man and asked, "What kind of crazy are you?" A shadowy figure flickers into existence and declares that Vin has vanished on a whim, so all the world knows it's insane and they must run for his safety. He stares at his wrist again and questions how much time has passed since the last check. An hour and 10 minutes ticked by as the wind grew calm, and Vaughn finally found his footing in the quiet room. When he ventured into that dark cave, he finally made it out of there and learned the secret was to avoid fighting anyone. But then he knew if he really wanted to find it, he had to search hard all his life before anyone could say no. The man warned with a shout that something strange was right in front of him, while he felt an extra vibration vibrating through his own body alongside the spirit herb he had been carrying. The lonely man stood frozen in his chair, watching the divine flowers glide past like a whisper, knowing that the secret was right there, but he had to keep looking up until his heart gave way to the moment it finally came. Fernan stood in the dark cave and saw James's goblin head twitching near a vein of crystal veins as he looked toward them. He tried to make a joke about the herbs, but nobody laughed because someone else was just mining the stones with this crazy monster by their side. The protagonist thought the old way wasn't working when he finally saw the beast, but now he knows that's just bad luck until he finds another way to get out of this bad place. He laughs at ink questions, while his own voice tells him that discovering the taste of real flesh never comes easily. The monster grew far too big for him to handle before a rock cracked and dropped onto its back. The spirit wakes up and climbs up, whispering loudly that everything is wrong because it wants to be a hero. He suddenly snaps his resolve and starts running toward the monster who's waiting right in front of him. And now, at this crucial moment, he has to fight the monster. Oh, the ego says, "Stop, get out," because he's already on a much higher plane than this world. He screamed as he charged forward, but his own heart pounded against his ribs while he tried desperately to force the beast to stop looking at him and actually start running away. He leaps high into the air and catches the electric spike before it hits him. Suddenly, the villain stumbles back as he realizes his blade is spinning on the ground. He jumps up to grab it, but instead of cutting his own throat, the sword slips through his fingers and hits A's chest before he can pull it out. He slipped into the water, then blinked wide-eyed at the change. A suddenly snaps into a roar that shakes the floor, forcing A to dive back toward where the curse has been cast. A giant beast lunged forward, sending a mighty stream of water flying across the battlefield as a brave swordsman tried desperately to intercept it with his blade. The snake snatched away a human's foot before he could even reach it. Both fell to the ground in the dark cave. Fernan sighed loudly because he thought the water dragon had finally been hungry enough to wake up. So he decided instead of fighting a monster he could see coming would be smarter than trying to stop its sudden movement. He didn't give up on saving his friends by fighting demons because they kept showing him what was coming for sure. And it all came down to one moment when a beautiful bird took flight into the sky so he could see how things were going again. He thought the weather was good enough, so he nudged James to get them out before the storm got too big for both of them to handle. He struggled to hold his breath as he lay flat against the cold brick wall. He yelled out that he nearly died because his ego demanded he run away from it all. It whispered that a dragon was stalking him exactly as if it meant to kill him, but the spirit only said if the earth didn't shatter beneath him, he'd never get away from being eaten. It wasn't a question at all about whether he held up well, for his self-deprecating reply had been that he'd managed it because the heart of the holy bird he got from Fellenberg was doing its job. Even though she felt she was miles from home, the herbal remedies were actually working well for her right now. It really takes a long time to climb that peak. It sounded like a weird feeling coming from that other side, yet I didn't even notice anything. They kept walking through the village as the young man asked about what the old man had seen, finding no trace of anything but a ghost who simply declared they were right. He was pushed by his own internal urge to rush back into the ground, ready to dig it up again. The boy listened carefully as he saw a shadow move across the floor, turning from an empty room into a glowing hole in the air where strange veins of or sparkled before him. He took the heavy stone out and set it down on the ground next to the hole. Outside, Jacis stepped forward and asked if Fernan had found the object he was after. Fernan was thrilled to hear that nothing had gone wrong, and Jace simply told everyone about a handful of scary monsters. He stood there smiling, knowing that he'd write down his contract for tomorrow, but he still hoped to meet the saints soon. A few days later, Fernan sat by the fire and thought he had finally found his way to the right, or to combine with Mithril. When Mithril walks into the arena, magic eats away at its mana like a hungry mouth, yet it stays silent, because it won't even look around to make you see how much it's hiding. He has to mix this new metal together to see if it can really shine, because nothing ordinary can hold that much promise. Adamant was not just a good metal. It was the true champion, far superior to any other, making it the perfect partner for the legendary Mithril. It's a rare metal far better than Mithril, so he kept asking himself how to acquire it without having any money left over. A voice pulled back from the darkness and shouted, "Help!" Fernan kept repeating his name as a young girl stumbled under his arms and begged an adult to help her flee the pack of wolves. Fernan looked at the woman with a mix of surprise and worry as she asked if he would finally stop ignoring her. He was curious because elves are so often left behind when the world goes wild. She leaped from the grass toward the tall oak, her eyes wide in a moment of pure surprise as she heard the sudden quiet. Fernan sighed, realizing that trying to handle them was actually quite a hassle. While the girl cast a powerful spell to clear the path before her, she paused to ask herself what he really felt right now, wondering if Fernan had come to him for something far more than just friendship. The elf whispered that it was just luck and then asked the protagonist if he wanted to walk through the door alone. Fernan asked gently if she really meant to come for an alliance with the Princess Elector, knowing that changing her mind might be the very thing that would prevent them from building genuine friendships together. Arif and Fernan both knew that the girl named Arif Fridian was a bit tricky. They could hear her flirting with other women, though nobody else noticed. He looked at her with a puzzled smile when she asked why he would deny being old, but then he decided that it wouldn't be good for people to live together anyway. Ariel whispered to Fernan that Fredian was suddenly becoming a lector instead of a Burv, leaving them unsure if their bond really meant they needed to stay so close or just wait for his new role. Fernan stared as she realized that being kind to everyone else was actually the very thing holding her back from making a choice for her own family. The girl felt puzzled when she heard that an elf would have to survive eating fruit alongside other people. Fernan glanced at her and thought about whose name was on the check. And Arya smiled, so brightly she felt like a fool, because she actually loved the whole group of 6 electors before she realized what was wrong. She rushed away from the crowd so she could get her dog before a dangerous water dragon came out of the lake. Fernan stared as Ariel asked why the cloud looked so wrong when nothing was happening in the sky. Fernan sprinted forward and caught her when she finally stopped looking at her senior. And suddenly, he felt like a fool because nothing seemed to be right with how the prophecy said the water dragon would emerge from that place. The chief wanted to figure out who was doing this, so he told every student back home to go away, while they stayed behind protecting anyone else in the room. He told his friend, "That's right, the dragon's coming back because the herb is still in my hands, so I need Professor to take it and go away." The dragon stepped forward with a smirk as he told everyone he was being very careful, yet his eyes met yours right there in front of him. Fernan steps forward and wraps his staff around A's neck to create a huge protective shield before turning back. His hidden powers kick in as he launches a massive stone stake straight for the dragon's head. Fernan watches as the creature fights back, realizing the dragon was far too strong for this moment. Professor Grad smiled as he watched his student hold firm while another wizard stepped forward to help them advance toward him. He paused mid-step and looked back as the beast finally snapped its jaws shut, ready to go anywhere but run. Fernan watches the sky change from calm to stormy and asks himself, did my meddling make this prophecy even worse, or will I still be part of saving humanity? Even though he's not done getting rich back from a lottery, he'd go bankrupt if he tried to ask if Alice is okay. The boy's eyes held such an admiring glint that he couldn't help but smile before seeing it. A senior friend made it home to protect a student like Fernan was doing, proving that keeping a classmate safe is really just being a good teacher. So even if the boss says he's fine, what really counts is him actually getting to work. Fernan gently told him to start chatting right away, even though Ain't was hesitant about taking the time for a second moment before answering his question back. The boy almost laughed out loud as he realized what a tiny embarrassment that had made his breath catch in his throat. Fernan takes Fernan to a quiet spot where nobody is listening, because at the moment, talking without someone else being there feels like the best way to share his thoughts. The Merchant Guild asked Ink whether they should buy anything. Fernan replied with a smile that said yes, but he wanted to hear what else would come along for the trade. He looked at Fern and told her she's gone out of money, so she can't buy any more things. A little boy looked up, shook his head to show he couldn't argue with the truth, while a friend laughed and said Fellenberg had always been so gentle toward him that he forgot he was supposed to expel him later on. There's no point in provoking it. He told me I can't hurt his feelings by saying sorry for him. He said it wasn't intended as a serious thing and nobody should worry about it, while I replied, I know that's just a joke. Fernan fiddles with a stack of money and wonders exactly what to do next. A little boy holds out a picture that looks like two friends, an adult and a teenager. Adam's dad stressed over getting the car, while the teen showed him the same thing right away. It's not just luck that goes with a tough situation. It's the way someone thinks they're in charge of things when reality is falling apart. Fernan questioned why Adam Annan might be selling it without a clear destination, wondering where exactly it had come from. He tells himself he doesn't need to know the source of his luck, so he never worries about stealing it from a thief. So he grabbed everything and made the room so packed with stuff that he was almost out of room to move around. Vernon looked down into the dark cave and saw nothing like the glowing red crystals, so he didn't know what to do next with the stolen mithril he found before going back inside. Wanting to find out which cave has both a say and, if it's interesting, the person checks his conditions again. The ego yells with a sharp warning that the Felnergs are so smart they won't let you move unless you admit nothing. Fernan looks at the contract with a flicker, thinking about how the guy who wrote it just wanted to sell his stuff away, while he tries to figure out if Fernan's plan works or not. Armin finds himself standing alone because the world treats his existence as a vulnerability, making him feel unable to defend anything at all. Fernan stared at the book, wondering why he was holding so much weight while pretending he wasn't. He tried to keep his calm face straight, but knew he had already lost it all before he could even give up that heart. And then the guy actually trusted him all along, earning a huge boost to his score after he saved the day. He says he's got everything figured out because he already knows what needs to be done. Fernan laughs and says, "Oh, I was the one who pulled him out of the water dragon's grip. So if anyone ever tries to make him a beggar, he'll always remember the moment. He must have been the bravest man in the room when that moment struck him. He had to risk everything to protect a friend, and suddenly, someone else was ready to say it's all right." Fernan steps up with a heavy heart, knowing he must get ready to talk to the person who promised the deal again. He questioned why he felt so mad while Adam and Teen were laughing together, and his own ego said, "I'm not crazy." At home, Hyde announced that he was finally home. He was far off in time to check what had changed during his absence. Fernan asked if he had finally returned, surprising Hyde because he was sitting atop a throne carved from adamantine and mithril. He asked for the question in the game where he bought a mine and found something. The secretary insists that no matter how much cash the manager has, stealing from the company is truly an act of total shame. His dishonesty might even make him feel more guilty than the previous year. He says he won't give away this thing, but then someone asks him about selling it, and the main character starts shoving his coffee into his mouth because he'll make an all-powerful god come to life from nothing. No one has a better friend than a merchant. He stares at the empty room and wonders why everyone else has already left. He decided to fix his silly mistake with a giant, scary golem that would hurt him more than anyone else. Fernan tells you he needs powerful magic and huge money, so only rich people can dream of this because a war is coming with deadly arrows that might destroy anything. The demons are already there, making it look like they will come to protect him and turn into solid guardians. High sees Hyde whispering that the merchant can't figure out why he's asking for one, Yet he keeps his eyes downcast because he thinks he looks more pleasant than anything else. Then he asked how big the things were, whispering about that colossal ego golem, while Fernan declared it could be 10 meters across. He then told us exactly how much it was, but by the time the pain in his head began to hurt him more than before. He stared at the parchment and felt a surge of dread, knowing he had once again written down his own sins as a warning to others. He invites his little master to sleep, but instead of letting him rest, he commands him to take a bite from the hot glass thermometer. Fernan tells everyone he's fine, yet his loyal servant insists on counting every scream he makes since his head feels like it just started hurting again. He walks into the dark to check the weather before it gets too hot for him. Fernan watched as a new shadowed vision flashed in his mind. A contractor was coming to attack a yacht club, but now he knew exactly what would happen next. Fernan joined this exclusive club that only rich kids from the academy can sign up for. And he did too, so he could find a way to connect with his friends. And then, the man who proposed that simple tea party on a luxury yacht at sea became the real reason why it wasn't just a dream. It was such an ideal time to see a monster appear on the water while someone in the boat tried to sneak into it. He sat back in the office chair, staring at the floor while the team's leader whispered doubts to him about the traitor who might be behind it all. Fernan puzzled by how many others were chasing him for the very reason he was holding that deadly weapon. It wasn't surprising at all that the man wouldn't turn out to be ruined because everyone had assumed he'd signed a deal for such an impossible situation. He froze in shock as he looked down and realized the air was freezing, so he quickly put a heavy ice pack over his head to stop the chill. Fernan just said he wasn't expecting anyone when he heard a young duke's fever so high that his doctor had to call for help right away. Instead, he decided to send the guest back home alone. He decided to go because it smelled like money, and when Professor Grad confronted him with the fact that the sea dragon's body was being sold, he asked if he really wanted to take it, only for Grad to tell him that everyone had heard Fellenberg would make a low offer. Fernan stood by the window, thinking hard about whether his help with the project should be considered a kindness or simply another job, and then asked himself, is there any reason why approaching someone who needs help could ever feel wrong? How do we find out if someone could actually turn down a job offered by a famous villain? And why does Rosalia need an assistant right now? The girl kept her fingers glued to the rules so hard that if she ever came back, she'd be a mess. The academy wanted him for the job because he's their leader. Fernan stepped up behind him, his eyes locking with theirs as he asked, why are you doing this? He looked at the Fellenbergs who were staring back, feeling the familiar tug of desire pull on his chest just as he was about to say anything else. Brad yells to Fernan, I'm going to sell the dragon parts, and I can't make it without buying something that's definitely good. Fernan replies with a grin, that sounds pretty right. Those very hard bones and teeth work like super strong weapons to protect your precious eyes and blood-soaked scales, making them the perfect armor. But buying everything isn't the right move when he's running a real business because he needs to make as much profit as possible. Grad was tempted by Fernan's offer to sell his old pet, but he soon realized the animals would never make it back. They all went straight to the professor's big research fund, and no one would buy them for a cheap price anyway. The old man's voice cracked with frustration as he demanded an amazing deal, but the poor girl just stared at him with wide eyes because she didn't know exactly where to start. Fernan tells him, I really only want those exclusive rights to sell my ships to the Academy. Every time they find a new ship, they are forced to make their own deal with the Golden Turtle Company. Did the Academy really think it could build such a massive school for everyone? And what exactly did he actually want from this project? Fernandin nods in disbelief as his eyes roll back on himself, convinced that the world wouldn't change because he'd just made a small mistake. But soon after that terrifying day of the prophecy, the whole Academy realized how vital fighting was and decided to make sure everyone knew what real battle looks like before they even got off school grounds. They're so clever that they'll stop any ship from breaking apart and make sure the repairs never happen again. That's how the company did its business. A girl walks into a quiet bookstore and asks the staff for a simple recipe book. She turned back to the shelf and found nothing on the menu. Yet the librarian whispered, they certainly bought this one, so we need to check the inventory. The door opens first, and he begins to search through the books with a focused look. He stands there, a dark shadow, swallowing the light, as strange whispers start to echo from his back. Armenian never found Vin Kalbender. In his plan, he should have chased him instead of waiting around for help. He felt confused when a mysterious shadow slipped past him while trying to follow his scent, leaving behind nothing but a trail of fading smoke that made him realize something was wrong with his path entirely. The librarian asked, is there any chance I could finally locate this? And the man replied, exactly, that's all I needed. The beast laughs, knowing its plans are already off the track, while the man gently reminds it to stop acting like crazy and let go. It was a bit odd that nothing came up for today's next plan, especially when Cal Bunder wanted to fight something as strong as that energy. He wondered why the Academy never caught up with him about it. The faded marks vanished as the creature wondered whether they were merely a fleeting chance, or if those signs were deliberately placed by someone else. A grumpy cat asked if anyone knew about a monster, but Mr. Green told them it was too scary for the world to even hear in the silence that fell over the town. He decided that the event was likely a trick and made sure he stayed away from danger until it all came to pass. When that tiny bit of magic really shows up, the old plan gets destroyed by all the chaos and damage it causes. So he treats losing Armenia above all else, because the number of new people coming in is getting so crazy big right now. It turns out he didn't even know why. Yet the exact same curve that the first emperor drew up meant everything could go wrong if an Armenian took over. It's the boss who will never let that old servant go through another bad run. He quietly said, "I'll remember this, and then I'll vanish." Then the librarian gets out of the room and rings his phone to tell him what happened. A new recipe cookbook is on his desk for him to cook with. She smiled and told him, "I hope your day goes very well." Fernan asks if someone else might feel that demonic energy at the restaurant. She told me it had been 3 days since we ate dinner together with Bella. Fernan asked, "Did you see the girl from the 19th? A young man stands in the middle of a tense room and asks himself why everyone else seems calm while he feels trapped, wondering if this is some kind of prank or real trouble. 3 days ago, Bella made sure the fight was over by saying her skills were finally ready to defend. Usually, warriors defend themselves with sturdy wood blades, yet today her choice was to wield sharp steel swords instead. Bella didn't even realize she'd been given an extra potion until the moment she held it in her hand, and then she burst into a wide smile. Bella felt a heavy weight in her hand that nothing she had ever seen could match. Yes, she's got her skills back on track now after that big shot from Luina. But that wasn't enough to stop the storm from breaking. Her skin felt like liquid glass, making Luina's sharp hits feel clumsy and useless against her agile movements. Luina said that the day had changed so completely that she was now a lightning-fast fighter with super strength. Bella responds that she has recently felt full of power and more in control.